This short documentary series on the humanities in Europe today, which starts from Europe but will expand to cover, I hope, the whole world, is the initiative of the European network of humanities centers and institutes. We decided collectively with our colleagues that it would be a good idea to present a series of portraits of leading figures in the humanities in our part of the world, and to use them as sources of inspirations, as role models, if you wish, for practitioners and students alike. The portraits of these very sort of charismatic, highly accomplished, distinguished professionals accomplishes another aim. It allows us to trace a genealogical sort of portrait of where the humanities have been, where they are at today, and where they could go, insofar as each person that we interview is asked to trace their own itinerary, past, present, and future. And simply by asking a question like, what was your faculty called when you studied as an undergraduate? And noticing the semantic, the institutional, the political transformations that the field has gone through. Just by doing that, I think the viewers should be in a position to measure the extent of the changes and the extent of the vitality of the field. The hope of this mini-series is indeed that we can collectively, as practitioners but also as spectators, express our love for, our trust in, our respect for this amazing field of the humanities at a time in its history when it is coming under attack in the press, in the public debate, in policy making and financial decisions that are really penalizing this field. The humanities in the 21st century, as you will see in the different portraits of these great figures we're offering to you, are a vital, vibrant, critical, creative, extremely accountable field, proud of its history, confident of its place in the world, and very hopeful for the future. We really hope that you will enjoy watching these great figures, and maybe you will be yourself tempted to run out and interview somebody that you know in your own neighborhood, in your own circles, because the humanities are everywhere and for everybody.
I have a broad background, it doesn't come from a very specific discipline that informs my work, but there were so many different influences happening at that time that broke into the arts that we were struggling with trying to make sense of it and integrating it, and that's what really gave the theoretical grounding for the kind of practice I do. I started visual arts at the School of Visual Arts, which was considered a university of art, but the large part was the design, and only a very small area that is fine arts, and that's the faculty where I studied. So it was called Fine Arts in New York, and then a postgrad studies in the Whitney Independent Study Program, which is very theory-driven art practice and theory. So theorists, curators, and practicing artists were all gathered around a table. There was no distinction made among us. That was, I think, very formative for me. I just felt that I investigated a bit the different possibilities in Switzerland, for instance, or even Germany, for getting an education in the arts, and I thought it was too closed within disciplines. You know, you could even start architecture or sculpture or painting, and I felt that was too rigid for me. So I went to the US to look for art schools, and I found SVA, which was very open. But still there, the painting faculty, the painting studios were physically separated from the sculpture studios, and you had to walk across the city to get to the theory classes. So you became kind of this walking mediator between these different fields, embodied, you know. The Whitney Independent Study Program is, as I said, very theory-driven. But when I started to practice art, it was not just art theory or art history, which I integrated from the humanities, but at that time it was already very contaminated by all kinds of other influences, feminist theory, ethnography, even post-colonial studies mainly. And I started to draw on all these different forms of knowledge and theories. And when I started to integrate that in my artistic practice, art critics didn't know what to do with this. They had no references in their own systems of thinking about art that could actually make sense of what I was doing. So this is when I had to start writing about these things myself, actually by sheer necessity, because I felt I needed a particular way of thinking and writing about this way of practice, this video essayist practice, in order to make my work the best understood. You know, it was not best understood by just analyzing it through art theory. In the beginning, certainly it was about complementing the issues in the video that I was not able to pack into the video itself, because there's so much more research that's going on around it. So I felt I wanted to expand and explain, but more and more, also by the lack of understanding by the community, by the theoretical community, what I was doing, I felt I wanted to reflect more on the meta level. Why am I doing this? How am I doing it? And there was a great interest actually also on the part of young theorists who started to engage in that sort of practice that was somewhere between visual arts, between political, it's somewhere in between politics and art and aesthetics and theory. So it's more like opening up a new field where these things can unite and be in dialogue with each other, rather than following a particular methodology that was given to me through my education. I think most of the time I start with a theoretical reflection that I draw from other writings, or through reading, or because I get interested in a political issue and I start to research. And then I try to find a way of working through this aesthetically. And then that flows back into the writing again, and others pick up on it and start to use that as to use my videos as a raw material for their own scholarship again. So I think it's kind of a recurring system where I use other people's knowledge, and it flows back through it, you know. And artists are a bit like a compost heap where they kind of work through a lot of things and then kind of bring it out again, and it's for others to work on again. So natural science didn't come into the picture for a very, very long time. Now I start to become more interested in it, but from the beginning it was philosophy, and it was gender and post-colonial theories mostly. And this is also the kind of theories that made it into the art school to complement. You know, art theory is drawn from philosophy to a big extent. So that's how we make contact with the humanities, basically. And but then we, you know, apart from the education, we had to come to terms with all these new ideas and streams of ideas through feminist theories and ethnography and all these other things. But that, to me, to find your way around this type of knowledge landscape was almost a kind of a field work, you know? It's not scholarship that's involved. So I have a very practical approach to humanities in some funny way. I would describe myself very simply as an artist, as a video essayist. And then I would have to continue with adjectives almost, like I do curatorial work, I do writing, but I wouldn't call myself a curator or a writer. You know, I think I feel very based in art, but then I find ways of negotiating this terrain and finding overlapping terrains with other disciplines. And I think the curatorial is really a fantastic territory to do that. You know, in the exhibition format, you can really also bring together natural science and humanities within the same space and make it speak to each other. My first projects had to do with the border of Mexico, if you remember, had to do with fieldwork, doing fieldwork in the geopolitical landscape, but at the same time in doing fieldwork on my own discipline as well. And in my own discipline, it had to do with creating a method of working between arts and documentary and so on. So again, a practice that can function within theory, aesthetics, and politics all at the same time. And so I would define fieldwork, it's out in the geography, creating a geography, but it's also about breaking boundaries within your disciplines. It's doing both works at the same time. The institutional structure is my institutional affiliation is quite loose. I have been doing most of my research at the Institute for Theory at the Zurich University for the Arts. And that Institute for Theory, as vague as it is, its name, it really suits me perfectly fine because it allows for all these different ways of operating without too many commitments to each and every discipline. And we do research only, no teaching. GeoBodies is just a name under which I can assemble all these different projects. In the beginning, I think GeoBodies the focus was more on the bodies because there were these migrating bodies across the globe. And now Geo is more the earth as a body. So I think it's still okay. I can keep the same name. It has shifted a little bit in the meaning, but it works. But it's not, I just didn't want to have a website that's called Ursula Biemann. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have a kind of a concept under which I can work, you know. But it's not an organization, although it's called .org. Yeah. Because I've been working so much with NGOs and NGO women. I thought org was a good way to connotate that. I think I came to feminist theory through the post-colonial studies. Post-colonial studies came first for me. I was very interested in engaging in other cultures or cultures that are happening in my neighborhood also. But Trinti Minha's work is so conceptual and so profoundly engaging in creating a completely different image of how to relate to otherness. You can't speak about it, and not everything needs to be articulated in words. And that's the whole point of how these works can act upon someone in this way that motivates you and transforms you entirely without being able to really put your finger on it. And I think these new ways of engaging with the earth and with this nature culture relationships and so on has made me very speechless in the beginning.
With admiration, wonder and awe and fear and all of those?
No, just complete utter disorientation of what theoretical tools I could use to even start to even begin tackling such a dramatic shift in thinking. Research-oriented art has been so important to me from the very beginning. I think I was one of the driving forces also in bringing ahead a way of kind of an aesthetic form of proposing theory. But I think right now I will move away more from research-oriented practice into more sensorial, more experiential things. I think that's what I will experiment with. And that probably will make it even more difficult to speak about it. But I feel that's what we need more. To be the modest witness in the field, I think has a lot to do with my modest appearance in the field, which is I'm going on my own with my little camera, engaging directly one-to-one with whatever I'm filming. I'm not coming with a team, I'm not coming with all kinds of technical infrastructures. that is intimidating my vis-a-vis, and I think that ends up so I end up making films that everyone could do. Practically, you go in the field and you just take your camera, and I think that brings the films to a very, oh, I could do this. I could also access this type. It's not creating a distance to other possible producers. So I engage my audience as possible producers, maybe. Although they pick up on the potential of a lot of theory that is in there that they could extract also. So I think I address my audience on different levels. I think I would like to make a meaningful contribution to bringing this human-earth relationship into a different aesthetic dimension. Well, I was intrigued by Uexküll's notion of the Umwelt, you know, how individual species create their complete, very selective environment, relating only to very few factors in the environment, and that every species does that somehow. So there's not one big environment within which we move, but very individual perspectives. I think I would like to experiment with what this could mean for filmmaking. You know, can we start to engage in these multi-perspective ways of looking at or developing a form of space that we can understand? It's very vague. You can see how vague this is. Very difficult tasks. But you know, when I began with borders, everyone thought that was an absurd topic, and you know, it became an important thing to reflect for years and years. So it's a time to just go out again and experiment. I have nothing to lose, you know.